So last week for Martin Luther King Day, I talked a little bit about the need for us to begin to go a little bit deeper within ourselves. And if we're going to effect change in the world, one of the meditations that I had in up here on a Wednesday morning was that maybe we need to start looking about some wounds and hurts that are closer to home. And I talked a little bit about the regional center. And I got an email from a congregant after that. And the question was, what's next? And he was meaning, okay, so what do we do with that? And so I've been thinking a little bit about that this week. And when I was sharing about the regional center, and what I was talking about was that we have to start seeing things the way they really are and addressing them from that level. And I don't know what that means or how that translates into actual movements around the specific regional center. But the reason I shared this story about the hurt that has happened throughout the generations in the United States with the cruelty and what we've done to one another is because I've been, and those of you who have been here with me for a few years, you know that I've been coming in my own way, in my own ministry, to this new paradigm that we have to start living life in a different way. And we need, and it's time, I think, for us as human beings to find and begin to live in to a new and an expanded paradigm of who we are and what ultimate reality is. And I think that's happening in the year 2023, and it has been happening. And I'm not talking about just in the last few years, I'm talking in the last decades and even centuries. I think that we as human beings are changing, we're expanding, we're growing. And that's really, really exciting. And for some of us, that can be really uncomfortable and it can be scary. And what happens as we begin to shift and change and understand ourselves and the world in a new way, in ways that aren't always in alignment with what we were taught to believe and what we understand when we think about ultimate reality, that's scary. Because what we see with just our five senses is not the whole picture, and it has never been the whole picture. And so what I've been thinking about this week is not that what we've necessarily been taught and how we live our lives, it's not wrong. Our culture, our societies, how we understand relationships, it's not wrong. But what I'm coming to understand that it is incomplete. And I believe that taking a look at that incompleteness is the invitation that I've been coming to in the last few years in my own life. And it's the invitation that I have been inviting us as a Unitarian Universalist community to think about and struggle with a little bit. And so what we are, who we have been, it's not wrong. There's just more to who we are than what we understand. And I think that that is what the quote that I shared with you from Lee Harris was talking about. We've been taught how to do life from people who don't totally understand it themselves. And then we have layer upon layer upon layer of miscommunication, of misunderstanding, of incomplete teachings that we then go out and apply in our day-to-day lived reality. And sometimes we continue to add layer upon layer upon layer of miscommunication. And so it's really nobody's fault, because it's just who we are and where we find ourselves in this point in time in history. But I really believe that we are at a point in history where this is changing. And my question for us to consider this morning is, do we want to be part of that change? Or do we want to stay with the status quo and grab onto the ever-changing and disintegrating paradigms and belief systems and structures that no longer serve us? I, for one, kind of think it might be fun to move with the change. But these are the questions we're being invited to deal with and think through in this year 2023. And I think I may have said last week, I don't know, I was thinking it last week. I just feel like 2023, it feels lighter to me. It feels like we've come through some pretty heavy years with contentious politics and a pandemic and masks and mandates and tension and drama. And I'm not saying all of that is over, but I'm optimistic. Maybe I'll say it that way. I'm optimistic about 2023. And I'm excited because really, it kind of is really interesting, and it's so fascinating if you expand outside of just our little paradigms. I've been saying this for many years, but those of us who are alive right now, and that's all of us, we're alive at a really fascinating time when science and spirituality are no longer contradicting each other. And that's pretty amazing. They are starting to support and reinforce each other. And so when I invite us to explore some of these higher spiritual concepts that I occasionally throw out to all of you and then wonder if I'm kind of off in the ethers, I want to be clear. I am not asking you to turn off your intellectual mind. I am not asking you to leave science and facts behind. I would never do that. But I am inviting you, and I'm going to probably start inviting you a little bit louder, to consider the possibility that what we know with our intellectual mind is not all that is out there, nor is it all that we can experience. And I heard a spiritual teacher said something the other day in one of the classes I was listening to, and he said that we have depression in the world, that depression can come from letting in too much of the outside world. And I'm going to just expand on that a little bit. What does that possibly mean? Depression can come from letting in too much of the outside world. Well, that can make sense on one level if we just look at, the psychological principles of depression and the chemical reactions of depression. But if we're looking at that statement from a metaphysical principle, what I want us to think about, is it possible that we are more than our intellect, that we are more than our five senses, that perhaps as science is beginning to demonstrate, we are energetic beings, and my energy right now is interacting with all of your energy right now. It just is because we're all here together. And if we have not been taught, and in our culture, we have not been taught how to be in control and maintain our own energy fields, what happens is that we're just like this open book to everybody around us. And they're who also haven't been taught how to deal with their energy fields are an open book to us. And if somebody is coming in and they're bringing in their own anxiety, and I'm an open book, I'm going to take on that anxiety. And if they're bringing in, somebody else is bringing in anger, I'm going to take in that anger. And all of a sudden, I've gone for a walk with my dog and I started out happy in my home and I'm walking around the block and all of a sudden I'm this anxious mess. I don't know if that's happened to anybody. And we think, well, okay, but what's wrong with me? And maybe nothing's wrong with me or us, but we don't have the skills to even understand how open we are. We don't have the skills to understand how to protect ourselves energetically because we have been taught that we are an intellect with 5 senses. And if we are living our lives in a paradigm that we are an intellect with 5 senses, we are not going to know how to navigate this world. And as you can see, I don't think a lot of us are navigating the world very, very well as a collective. And so I always say invitation is for us to start thinking about this a little bit. Because I'm just going to throw out an idea, a concept that what if we started to understand mind a little bit more than just our brain? That maybe the brain is the instrument of mind, but mind is more than that. And what if we started to think about mind as more than just our intellect? What if we thought about the fact that maybe there's probably more, but I'm going to start with 7 levels of mind, and the intellect is one of them. But that means there's 6 other ways that we at all times are interacting in this world. And if we're not aware of it, then we're going to be bumping into each other energetically, and we're going to be tripping each other, and we're going to, kind of be a collective mess, which, can be fun, but we maybe could do it a little bit better. So I want us just to think about, and these are metaphysic principles. They're not necessarily, if you are a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you may understand some of these terms a little bit differently. But let's just think about, if we start with, we have a subconscious mind. And what is that? That is just the storehouse of our memories. It is neutral, but everything that has ever happened to us from the time that we were little just goes into this subconscious part of us, and it is just stored there. We don't always see it because it's not conscious, it's part of the subconscious, but it's there. And I invite us to at least open our mind to the possibility that everything that we've experienced from the time we were babies has gone into our subconscious mind. And for those of you that want to expand a little bit more, if you might open to the possibility that maybe there have even been past lives that some of us might have led, perhaps some of those memories also might be in our subconscious. So we have this storehouse of memories that are around us all the time. And then we go up one little level, and that goes into, it goes from our subconscious mind to our unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is that part of us that is always assimilating and acclimating those things that we're not yet consciously aware of. For example, the beautiful music that Janet does. When she started learning piano, it was in her conscious mind. And then the music kind of became part of her, and it went into that subconscious mind and the unconscious, and it assimilated and acclimated, and now it just comes through her fingers in this beautiful way that she's kind of looking at the notes, but my guess is that you're kind of just feeling it, right, Janet? That's what we do when we drive. I'm teaching Danny to drive. And the reason that teenagers have to have 50 hours of driving experience, I think, it's because we're teaching them consciously, okay, you get in, you check your mirrors, you turn the key. She drives, she has her experience, but then when she's not driving, she has this part of her that is assimilating and acclimating that experience, what she just learned. So the next time she gets in to drive the car, a little bit more is there, even if she hasn't consciously been aware of it. And by the time she gets her license in August, a lot of it will just be kind of fluid and smooth. And how many of us, when we're driving, when those of us who drove to church today, we're thinking about, okay, now I have to start the key, now I have to hit the gas, now I have to turn on the blinker. Or how many of you were thinking about A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and all of a sudden you like pulled into the parking spot here. And you're like, okay, we're here. But did any of you think about how you got there? No, because your unconscious mind simply knew what to do to take you through the mechanism of driving a car. So that is our unconscious mind. And if we think about that, think about how much in our lives we're doing unconsciously. Whether it's driving, or it's knitting, or it's playing the piano, or it's whatever.
Okay.
There's so much that's going on beneath that surface that we're just so assimilated and acclimated to. It's helping us maneuver through this life. And then we get to that next level of mind, which is the dream state. So this is where at night, when we allow ourselves to just relax, and that's where we have these images and we have these dreams, and we kind of are on some level still not totally conscious. We're processing things. And that's why, and there's no really judgment to dreams, right? Because we dream and then we wake up and you're like, well, I was, eating a lemon yellow Cadbury egg when an alligator came and chomped it out of my mouth, and I took a slingshot, and it makes sense in the dream. And then when you're like talking about it, you're like, that was kind of a bizarre dream. But that is another level of mind that is helping us process the world and reality around us. And then we get to our intellect. But you see how much has happened before we've even gotten to our intellect? And I am not saying that we throw out the intellect. The intellect is what is allowing me to be here talking to all of you right now. The intellect is what is allowing Janet to play the piano and read the music. The intellect is how we got these 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism. The intellect is how we got our inclusivity proclamation, and how we come together as communities, and why and how we vote, and how we come up with bills. We need our intellect. Our intellect is how we understand science. We're going to be using our intellect this week to figure out the sound system that Jimmy left us. We need our intellects, but this is where the problem is when we think that that's all there is. There's so much more. And so we use our intellects, but then we also have something called inspiration. And inspiration comes to us. And how many of you have just kind of out of the blue had a thought or an idea pop into your head? And you're like, oh, that was a cool thought. I'm going to act on that. And acting on that creates something really beautiful. It creates an art project, or it creates divine music, or it creates the idea for a novel or a book. And we say, oh, well, that was just the intellect. Well, yes, we're using the intellect to act on the inspiration, but the inspiration came from somewhere. And what I'm saying is that that inspiration didn't pop out of our brain, and it didn't pop out of our intellect. It came from a different level of mind. And this week, I invite you to think about all of those little inspirations that have come to you throughout the years, or even I think we get inspired every single day. And then finally, that last level is illumination, not illumination. We do have kind of an illuminate mind. That's where we begin to integrate the intellect and the inspiration. So that's number 5, illumination. But then we have our intuitive mind. And that's where we have that inner knowing that just says, I don't know, something doesn't feel right. I think maybe I should not go on that trip. We don't necessarily know why, we just are kind of like, something's not quite right here. Or likewise, something is right, and I just intuitively feel like this is a person I'm supposed to get to know, or this is a faith community I feel like I'm part of. That's sort of our intuition. And so I just want us to think about some of this, about how our world, how our lives might change both individually and collectively if we are allowing ourselves to live our lives out of all 7 levels of mind. So I'm gonna ask you this. How many of you think that you consciously have been living out of 7 levels of mind? Okay, I have a few hands raising. How many of you can go along with me to think that perhaps without realizing it, you've been living through your 7 levels of mind? A few more hands raising. I'm just saying it's kind of fun to think about. And I know I always, when I talk like this, sometimes I get pushback, and I was trying to sort of have this conversation with Robert the other day. And he's very linear, for those of you that know Robert a little bit better than just the last 7 days. And I said something to the extent of, well, the We Shelter, it came together and it was wonderful because, it came together on all these different levels. And he was like, Wendy, it came together because I made about 500 phone calls. And that's where he was. And I was like, yes, but I didn't say to him but I know Sherry Cole a little bit, and she's working on some different levels too. And it's a both and. We need that intellect. We need, if we want to build something here, we have to show up and we have to do it and we have to apply it and we have to use our intellect to come up with a plan and a to-do list and a task list. And we have to make phone calls and we have to put on our calendar that we're going to bring food. We need all of that. But I just don't think that that's all there is. And so I just invite us to, if life is feeling kind of hard, or you just feel a little bit stuck, this year, I ask you to start thinking and asking yourself, okay, am I maybe being a little bit driven by some subconscious memories that haven't quite made it to my conscious mind? Am I perhaps stuck in some old thought patterns? Am I open to inspiration, or am I cutting that off? Am I listening to my intuitive knowing? It's a different world paradigm. But I think it can be a lot of fun. And I think that what's happening in our country is that we have some people that actually really understand what I'm saying right now and are like, yes, we're going there. It's time. And then there are people that would have no clue what I'm talking about and want to stay kind of where they are comfortable. And for some of those people, it's a very comfortable world that says we're not going to talk about anything that makes us uncomfortable. We're going to make sure certain, classes are not allowed in, certain states. We're going to make sure that we're not allowed to say certain words. And that's because I think there are friends, family, and neighbors who are just more comfortable in an intellect with 5 senses. It doesn't make them bad. It doesn't make them wrong. It makes their life experience incomplete in my mind. And so yes. Our chaplaincy class met yesterday, and I always get really good resources when they meet. And so one of the chaplains started the class yesterday with this quote from Richard Rohr about prophets. And so I want to read this to you. Prophets always talk about the untalkable and open a huge new area of talkability. For those who are willing to go there, it helps us see what we didn't know how to see until they helped us see it. I'm going to say that again. For those who are willing to go there, it helps us see what we didn't know how to see until they helped us see it. That's how we begin to recognize a prophet. There is this widening of seeing, this deepening of a truth that was always there. Prophets generate a crisis, so it's almost understandable why they're usually called troublemakers and so often killed. They generate the crisis because while everybody else is saying the emperor is beautifully clothed, they are willing to say, no, he's naked. We're not supposed to say the emperor has no clothes. It's the nature of culture to have its agreed upon lies. I'm going to say that again. It's the nature of culture to have its agreed upon lies. Culture holds itself together by projecting its shadow side elsewhere. That's called the scapegoat mechanism. Rene Girard and others have pointed out that the scapegoat mechanism is the subtext of an entire biblical revelation. It's the tendency to export our evil elsewhere and hate it there, and therefore to remain in splendid delusion. I'm going to say that one again too. It's the tendency to export our evil elsewhere and to hate it there, and therefore to remain in splendid delusion. If there isn't a willingness to be critical of our own country, our institutions, and ourselves, we certainly can't be prophets. When the prophet is missing from the story, the shadow side of things is always out of control, as much of the world today, where we do not honor wisdom or truth. It seems the prophet's job is first to deconstruct current illusions, which is the status quo, and then reconstruct on a new and honest foundation. It seems the prophet's job is first to deconstruct current illusions, which is the status quo, and then reconstruct on a new and honest foundation. That is why the prophet is never popular with the comfortable or those in power. Only a holy few have any patience with the deconstruction of egos and institutions. That is Richard Rohr. My sense is that perhaps he's a bit of a prophet. So I welcome and invite us to take this day, this week, this year, to start to think about where are some of our own illusions and delusions that we have built a solid foundation upon, and if they really are perhaps just illusions, are we ready to let some of them go and maybe expand our understanding of reality so that we can have a new and stronger and more secure foundation? So I'm going to close today with these words from L.R. Knost. Another one of the chaplains opened with these words yesterday. Life is amazing, and then it's awful, and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. Breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living, heartbreaking, soul healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful. With that, let us sing together 1017, Building a New Way. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitments. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Wander as you may, blessed is the path you take. May love guide you on your way.